Fantastic, Dr. Vin. I just want to know from you, today is the day where they're opening up, vaccine appointments for those who are 50 and older. What do we make of this as we head into this next 2 week stretch of, the whole population making their appointments?
This is great. This is fantastic. This is exactly what we want, because we have to remember that one of the major tools that we're going to be able to use to get this outbreak under control here locally, right, is mass vaccination to get herd immunity. We need somewhere around at least 70-75%. Some estimates even say as high as 90% of the population to have immunity to COVID before we can anticipate an impact on transmission. Which means if we can achieve that, we can get back to some vision of normalcy, right? So the only way we're going to do that is to vaccinate everybody. And the fact that we are lowering the age groups of the people that are eligible for vaccines means that we're closer to getting that percentage.
Fantastic. I actually saw a poll today saying that it's about 70% of Quebecers who want to get the vaccine. So we're going to need a little bit more, right, to get in there so we can go back to normal, right?
Yeah, so we have to hold on. We have to just be a little bit cautiously optimistic here, right? That it's good that we are lowering the age range, but we have to remember two things. In each of the age ranges, we have to have high uptake. Okay, so we need to have people buy into the fact that we need this vaccine for all of society to try and return back to normal. The other thing to consider is that we're only talking about ages 50 for now, but of course, we know that there's a trajectory to decrease the age ranges, right? So that we can eventually get to 18 years of age, which is also encouraging. But we have to remember that those who are less than 18 are school-aged children. And we do know that schools are also, have been point sources for some outbreaks, which means that we also need to envision including them eventually. And with preliminary data coming from clinical trials, it looks like at least those who are 12 to 18 years of age, a vaccine works just as well in them as if they were older, and seems just as safe. So eventually, as we roll out to other age groups, as we continue to roll out, and as we are able to meet those demands because of vaccine supply, we are setting ourselves up for for herd immunity, which will be one of the ways out of this situation.
You're saying there's a need for sort of a buy-in, and this morning there's articles about how restaurants and bars are hoping to open up immediately because they say, if people are vaccinated, can't we open our doors? So what do you say to that, in that proposal of reopening gradually for those only who have received at least one dose?
Well, we have to remember a few things, right? To be the full vaccination, to say somebody has been vaccinated, what we want to say is really that they've been fully vaccinated. So while the first dose in some people, in most people, seems to be somewhat effective, it's not the case for all people. So there are some people who have medical conditions. Those medical conditions are not rare. Things like cancers, things like transplants, things like certain types of medications. Those people don't respond as well to one dose. So those people, and even otherwise healthy people, really need that second dose to be able to maximize their immune responses. Some people who are immunocompromised may even need more. Only data will tell us. So I think we have to remember that we have to be cautiously optimistic. The fact that we have a vaccine rollout that's moving forward is exciting. It's highly encouraging, but it's not time to let loose and to participate in social activities as if we are all immune, because we're not. And even if you were an otherwise healthy person who got the first dose of the vaccine, we have to remember that it still takes about 2 to 3 weeks for you to be able to produce protection responses from that vaccine dose. So again, just because you got a vaccine today doesn't mean tonight you're going to the bars. It really needs to have some judicial thought process here. You have to be very careful about what your social activities are, because what we don't want is transmission of variants that may not be fully protected by the vaccines in people who are not fully vaccinated, and therefore you're going to get ongoing variant transmission, and then we're going to be doing a COVID cha-cha where we're one step forward, two steps back.
So right there, you're saying one dose is not enough, and it seems by June 24th, as Quebec says, that's when everybody will have received at least their first dose. So maybe only till weeks later will then the population be protected by that first dose. But you're saying how can these restaurants and bars then operate in the future without having this full vaccine protection, maybe until September, October?
I'm going to be honest with you. There are clear issues here beyond just medical, right? There's obviously economics. There's obviously politics. I have friends who are in the restaurant business. I know how much they're struggling economically. So there are those livelihoods also to consider. This is not a simple question of don't open until we vaccinate everybody. I think it requires a little bit more of insight and forethought before making those types of simplistic comments. But what we do want to emphasize is that the people who work in restaurants and bars and the people who attend restaurants and bars are also at risk if they're not vaccinated, or even if they are only partially vaccinated. We know that they could potentially still get infected. It's not the first dose of the vaccine is not 100% absolute. We know that there are certain strains that are circulating in Quebec, like the variant from Brazil, where you can get reinfected if you were previously infected. So there are all these little nuances that are coming out that tells us that yes, we are on the right path with the vaccine rollout. If we can get the first dose into everybody by June 24th, and in somewhere in mid to end July, we'll have hopefully a good level of herd immunity, but not perhaps the ideal one. And so perhaps there will be some return to normalcy, but to the actual return of the normalcy that we are used to before COVID, I don't think we're quite there yet. And we would probably need to envision a rollout of the second dose at a mass scale before we can even consider that.
Just lastly, what is it like then if we have to implement something like a vaccine passport to say, hey, yes, I have received that one or two doses? Is that going to create some sort of, I guess, discrimination?
So those are questions I think that are outside of the medical profession. I mean, from a medical perspective, I would highly encourage anyone who is eligible for the vaccine to get the vaccine. That's just for medical purposes. But the idea of a passport also would imply that there are some social advantages also to doing that. But that involves more ethics and law that are outside of my domain. I can tell you, though, that in people who have gotten the vaccines, we know that, for example, the elderly have gotten the first dose, and many of them are actually getting their second doses now, whereas the younger age groups are also getting their first dose. You can imagine that if these people are being vaccinated, you can imagine family visits that are going to be very safe, and because they're safe, that's going to be less anxiety provoking, because you're less likely to transmit to your elderly loved one when you go visit them. And so, hugs and kisses may actually be on the agenda anytime soon. If you choose to not get vaccinated, you should know that you can infect other people. They may be vaccinated, but you may be infecting them with a strain that's not adequately covered by the vaccines. And because you're not vaccinated, you are definitely going to be at risk for getting not only infected, but at risk for transmitting. So the fact that you can actually be a source of transmission to your loved ones, that's a bit tough to take as on a personal level. And so for those reasons, I would encourage people to get vaccinated.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vinh. I appreciate it.